This movie's funny, it's got a little bit of action, but one of the best parts about it, it has tons of heart, specifically for a movie that you think is going to be about martial arts. Hey, what's up, nerd fam? This is your boy Gashan. I want to welcome you to Enter the Nerd. So today we're going to be talking about The Paper Tigers. It's a movie that just came out on Netflix. So a lot of people might have seen, or maybe you haven't, the coming attractions for this, which usually show a bit of comedy, a bit of martial arts. Now, what's funny about this movie is some people might be disappointed because they thought this was going to be like an all-action martial arts comprehensive film. But it's actually one of my favorite types of film. Now, mind you, I love martial arts films, but this is one of those films that uses martial arts as kind of like the backdrop, but really like a lot of principles and a lot of different, I'll say, emotional topics as the main forefront. And let's get into what that is. Now, as a brief synopsis, Paper Tigers is a story about three disciples of a certain Sifu who used to be all about Kung Fu when they were younger, or Kung Fu. Because literally, Kung Fu is like a Western transliteralization of Kung Fu, whatever. Go look it up, right? So, pretty much three disciples of a Sifu. They loved martial arts when they were younger, specifically Kung Fu. Even went to Japan to go fight and compete for it. And now, you're talking about maybe, 25 years later, they're all adults, and they've fallen very wayward from where they became. And especially away from their Sifu, who has died, and their death brings them back together, and now they have to avenge their Sifu's death, which they realize was not just a heart attack, it was something more nefarious. So there you go, right? Now that seems like something that would be a plot filled with a whole bunch of action maybe, and there is some action, but a lot of it is about growth. It has a lot of heart in this story, specifically with the main character, Danny, who was like the prize pupil, the guy that had the highest ceiling out of the three friends. He goes from being all about that to, working for an insurance company and not necessarily even being the best father. And, he's divorced, so presumably not the best husband, and not being a man of his word, not having those honorable principles that Sifu instilled in him. And even his other two friends, you have Jim, who also hadn't spoken to Danny because of an incident they had in Japan, and the third friend, Hing, who was like the most loyal to Sifu, but even eventually him kind of fell to the wayside. And it happens sometimes. Sometimes you become wayward sons or children to your parents because maybe you no longer see eye to eye. Maybe those things that you grew up thinking from them, like you grew away from that. Maybe you just didn't understand those principles that they were trying to instill in you. And that's why I really gravitated towards the story of this, because I'm like, you know what? It's cool. It could be a whole bunch of martial arts techniques and stuff like that. And they do have, some, right? There's some good bouts of choreography in here, but it isn't really about that, because a lot of time it's the main characters really getting beat up because they're older. They're not the guys they were when they were younger. And it's also them realizing that too, and understanding like we can't just get up off the couch and do this anymore. But then they have to resort to this. And they also have to become better individuals, because that's also something that's fallen to the wayside, who they are, their principles. That is something I really admired about this film. Now, it's actually another film this reminds me of, which has nothing to do with martial arts, which is why I could see a lot of people seeing the coming attractions, seeing martial arts, and going, how come there isn't more of this? If you remember, there was a film called Ad Astra. It was by Brad Pitt, and a lot of people saw the coming attractions for that, and they figured that this was going to be like a Lost in Space film. And when they saw it, they were disappointed because it wasn't really about the action. Space was actually kind of used as a backdrop to develop all the idiosyncrasies of Brad Pitt's character, which centered around his father. So he was an astronaut that had a whole bunch of father issues, and space happened to be like the glue that held them together, or what actually pulled them apart. It actually did both. Space brought them together and pulled them apart at the same time. I thought that was a really good narrative, and there's more to that. So if you could, if you're a person who likes more than just action, I would say go watch that film. But back to The Paper Tigers. There's also some really cool things about like this martial arts commentary that I really liked about this, which was there are a lot of people, especially within my life and in me practicing and training and competing, there are a lot of people who come in to whatever gym, dojo, whatever you're a part of, and they come in there for the wrong reasons. And a lot of people have this thing where they think that if someone is just bad or a bully, like they'll never be able to excel in martial arts, and it's actually not true. Like there are some people who are just they're not good people, but they have like the acumen and the athletic ability and all that to be able to really get to high levels of martial arts and use this for the wrong purpose. It's always something that I've seen in modern day MMA. A lot of guys, when you see these gyms, like just teach them the techniques, but some of them don't teach them how to be good individuals through these techniques. Not just through the techniques, but through the training. Understanding like what jujitsu can mean when it comes to life. Understanding, it's such a beautiful thing. And if you're a person who's been like raised with martial arts and training, you understand like what this really means, like how that type of training and that I'd say mentorship, which is actually funny. There's a video with Joe Rogan and Jason Willis. You have to watch it because they get really deep into like what martial arts specifically for young men means for mentorship and how it shapes them. So I'll probably put the link down there because it's an excellent video. But I think this really does touch on that, especially with Danny and his son, because he's a person who is not keeping his word. His son actually does need him to be around more. Like he needs a mentor. He has it in his father, but he's not being it. He doesn't even want to teach him, even though that was a gift that was given to him by his kind of surrogate father. Because as you can hear, none of them ever really talk about their parents. So there must be some type of gap. You can kind of infer there's some type of gap within their own home that they sought this out as well, which is what usually happens. A lot of guys who look into martial arts, sometimes it could be, I'm tired of getting picked on, but sometimes they love the camaraderie, they love being around people, they love being able to learn something and grow with a whole bunch of other people. And that's something that I feel like this movie shined a beautiful light on. And then sometimes, and it shows the ugly side of it, which is like this sometimes overly competitive nature to just prove that you can dominate another individual, even sometimes outside of the competitive sphere, where it doesn't make sense and it gets a little bit degrading, where obviously every martial art form that's existed was always developed, and it was developed for either war as like a killing technique or to defend yourself, right? That's, if you look in the history of any martial art, that's usually what it was meant for, right? But then as time has gone on, whether it's competing or just teaching people, they've been able to work this stuff and use it to even just develop human beings, just develop them into tougher and stronger people mentally. But it shows that even with some of that teaching, life gets in the way and you can move away from that. But it doesn't mean that you can't come back. And that's something that I really like about this movie. Let me know. Please go watch this movie. And if you have already, let's talk about it in the comments. Until then, keep watching martial arts flicks, keep on growing, start training, and enter the nerd.